Ape index, height, weight, BMI. I love that all of those are part of this analysis because basically it sounds like the takeaway is none of them really matter that much, so just stop worrying about it.
Kind of shocked me, and I was really excited about it when I first started making this model, is that, yeah, exactly. Height, weight, wingspan, BMI do not turn out to be significant at all. Which, again, when I kind of talk about the interpretation of this data, what that says to me is that no matter what you start with, the things that you can't necessarily change about yourself in this way, no matter what you start with here, it does not say that you won't climb hard. It basically means that whatever your size and your ratios are, you can climb whatever grade your training allows you to climb or your experience allows you to climb, which I think is so cool, because like
cool.
More often than not, and part of why I felt like I burn out on climbing is just I'd be at the crag and you hear the same conversations over and over again about like, I'm just not tall enough. I like weigh too much, I don't have the ape index. And you're like, okay, well, maybe those things are important for like a singular move on a singular thing where it is for sure easier if you're taller or X, Y, and Z. But what this says is like, if you have the grit and the determination and you climb for long enough and you do the right training, you have no glass ceiling.
That's awesome.
Which is just really empowering to me, especially, the weight side. And I think that, many of us climbers have gone through our ups and downs with body image and weight. And I certainly have myself. I think I got told many times growing up, like, oh, you're going to climb way harder if you lose 20 pounds, and
oh, wow.
It's like that may be true, but the effort it would take me to lose that weight and the, like malnutrition I have or things like that are not as important as learning more skills and spending more time outside and training. And so that was really meaningful for me. And that's part of why I got so excited on continuing this analysis, was to maybe give a little shout out to everyone out there who it's like, yeah, like weight does not matter, with the caveat that everyone in this data set was generally within the healthy BMI index. That's what we looked at, which the healthy BMI index is like 19 to 25, and most people in this data set were at like 22. But we had like quite the range. We had all the way from like 10 to 40. And so like for me, as if you're 5'8", that means that you can be between like 120 pounds and 185 pounds and generally still be with it. So like the range is really large. Like, yes, if we did this data set on every single person in the US, up to like several hundred pounds or something, like I'm sure it would come out as being important, right? But like for most people who care about training and who will have climbed for this long and doing all these things, like chances are you're within the healthy BMI index. And like I technically am not. I weigh like 165 pounds and I have like a +7 and I'm really muscular for a climber. And so it's like, just by BMI, I weigh too much for that, but that does not actually mean anything. Yeah, that was probably my favorite thing that we pulled out of it. I think, Carly's going to be a little more excited about the training metrics side of it. She's been diving into that a lot more than I have, but I was like, oh, this is cool. That gives hopefully a lot of people a lot of confidence. One thing that was interesting is age did turn out to be slightly significant. Like in theory, the older you are, the less likely you'll climb hard. But in my opinion, that probably comes down to like, oh, did you get a job? Do you have, did you X, Y, and Z that just meant you couldn't climb outside as much? I think it's still, if you had the same dedication and time and all this stuff at an older age, it probably wouldn't matter. But, just again, this is a data set of 600 normal people who have been climbing, and that is what it said. So I'm like, oh, wish age didn't matter, but it showed out to be maybe a little important. But I think that's one that's easy to get around. It's not like a deal breaker like your height, right? And I think the only other thing that this data set doesn't tell us that much is we're measuring our metrics for success to be what is your hardest singular boulder or sport climb, right? And so, what this data does show is that you can go, it also might show you can go find a hard climb that suits you, for your height and wingspan and X, Y, and Z, right? But maybe it would vary a little bit if you're like, oh, how many of this grade in these different styles and like dive into all these different ways to measure success, like hardest onsite or X, Y, and Z. And maybe it would change a little bit. Like, you know, I have only climbed 13B, right? But I've climbed 13B sport and trad, and I've climbed 50 13As and Bs put together. But then someone else in this data set who projected a 13A for a month and then a 13B for 2 months has the same measured success that I have.
Yeah, I gotcha.
So one of my worries was like, oh, do we need all these other ways to measure success? Like, should we ask for people's, hardest onsite or all these things? And I think the cool thing about large data sets, and hopefully continuing to be a larger data set, is that there will be enough people in there, like my friend who just sent a single of those, and enough people like me who've sent a bunch of them, that they end up washing out in the mix. So yeah, that's one of our goals for getting more people to kind of do the survey and stuff, is to see if anything else kind of pops out there.
Yeah. Carly, what surprised you about this analysis?
Yeah, so I guess there's a couple things. I guess let's just probably the biggest thing that was interesting is like when you put, and again, this is for this data set, when we have everything together and we have these variable importance factors. So these are significant variables that are influencing the data set. And when you enter this in a model, we have like, different coefficients for each of these variables, weighting them differently, in order to get the model to be at the 75 to 80% correlation. The coefficient that we were multiplying your max hang had to be negative, meaning that as, for this data set, to create a model that took in all of these variables that we're talking about and create one that is in that 75 to 80 correlation range, the harder that, or the higher these max hang numbers were creeping, really was not only not helping, but it was actually got this negative a negative thing attached to it, which was I think, and we'll probably spend some time talking about interpreting that, and was interesting. I think I've had and I, in the context of maybe I kind of felt this way in that, like, there's a lot of people that are like, the max hang's really been pushed, and that doesn't mean that finger strength doesn't matter. Of course, that's not what I'm saying. But if instead we're looking at this, like, how properly is this metric being trained in this particular data set, is being, these, people are getting overpowered for their skill level, maybe, but it's at some point when it's getting a little bit too much attention from the individual climbers. So that's pretty counterintuitive to a lot of, I think, what we've all heard a lot about.
Got it.
Okay. Basically, it told us that finger strength was important. It met the bar for being an important variable, but it was negative. So like if I filled out the survey, and I said that my finger strength was 2.0 or something for, strength weight ratio, and it said I climbed V10, and then I go put the exact same numbers in, and I say that my finger strength is 2.2, it's going to say that I climbed V9. And basically,
that's a better way of describing it, Casey. Thank you.
That's good.
Basically, so what that told us is, like what you're saying, a lot of people are obsessed about finger strength. I think it's like one of the biggest things I see on social media every day, and everybody is just like so into finger strength that basically it told us for these 600 people, they overtrained finger strength.